Have you ever wondered what could make the most feared black wolf in an entire kingdom trust a poor Omega girl instead of the Alpha King himself? Every night, while everyone else called it a monster, she secretly fed the starving beast with the last piece of her own bread. No one knew the chained wolf was hiding the kingdom's greatest secret. But when the starving black wolf walked into the Alpha King's throne room and ignored every guard, every noble, and even the king himself, choosing to kneel before the Omega instead, the entire kingdom froze. What happened next exposed a royal betrayal, awakened an ancient mate bond, and changed the fate of the kingdom forever. Cold rain had a way of making the kingdom look honest. The golden towers of the capital still shimmered beneath distant lightning, but beyond the city walls, where nobles never bothered to look, the truth hid beneath mud, rusted iron, and broken lives. Every evening, as the market lamps burned low and the merchants locked away their fortunes, one small figure quietly slipped through the narrow back streets. She wore a faded gray cloak that had been patched so many times it barely resembled its original fabric. Rain soaked her boots, but she never slowed her pace. Beneath the cloak, wrapped carefully inside a worn piece of cloth, rested 2 small pieces of stale bread and a strip of dried meat. It was everything she had left. Her name was Elena. She was an Omega. In this kingdom, that single word decided almost everything before anyone even looked into her eyes. Forgettable. Useful only when someone stronger needed labor. Yet despite the world's opinion of her, Elena carried something that could not be measured by rank. She carried kindness. And every night, she gave it away. The abandoned prison yard sat outside the northern gate, hidden behind collapsing stone walls and twisted iron fences. Years ago it had held dangerous criminals. Now it held something everyone feared even more. Monster. Least, that was what people called it. The prison guards refused to stand watch after sunset. Travelers crossed the road rather than pass nearby. Children whispered stories that a cursed black wolf had slaughtered entire patrols before finally being captured by royal hunters. Some claimed its eyes glowed red. Others insisted it could speak. A few believed looking directly into its face guaranteed death before the next full moon. None of them had actually seen it. Fear had done the storytelling for them. Elena quietly pushed open the rusted gate. It groaned loudly against the wind. Pause. Listen. Nothing. Only rain tapping against broken wagon wheels. Only distant thunder rolling across the mountains. Only heavy breathing. She followed the sound toward an old prison wagon sitting beneath a dead oak tree. The iron cage was enormous. Silver chains wrapped around its thick wooden frame, glowing faintly beneath moonlight. 2 golden eyes slowly opened. The wolf didn't move. Simply watched her. Even after weeks of these secret visits, the sight stole her breath. It was massive, far larger than any ordinary wolf. Its fur should have been beautiful, but starvation had turned it rough and dull. Every rib showed beneath dark skin. Deep wounds surrounded its neck where enchanted silver restraints had burned through flesh. Its paws barely had enough strength to shift across the wooden floor. It looked less like a monster, and more like something the world had forgotten. Elena slowly knelt outside the cage. "Good evening," she whispered softly. The wolf remained perfectly still. No growl, no snarl, just quiet breathing. She carefully unwrapped the cloth protecting the food. "I know it isn't much," she smiled sadly, "but today I managed to save a little more." The smell of dried meat reached the wolf. Its ears twitched. Hunger flashed across tired golden eyes. Yet it still refused to move. Elena noticed the hesitation. "They never fed you properly today." The words escaped before she realized she had spoken aloud. Silence answered her. She carefully pushed the bread through a small gap beneath the bars. The wolf stared at it, then looked back at her. "Oh, nothing." A loud laugh echoed across the yard. 3 slave traders crossed between nearby wagons carrying barrels of supplies. One noticed Elena immediately. "Look at that." Another laughed. "The little Omega is feeding death again." The oldest trader spat into the mud. I told you she'll end up inside that cage herself. Another shook his head. Let her waste the food. The beast won't live another week anyway. Their laughter echoed long after they disappeared. Elena lowered her eyes. Not because their words hurt. Because she had heard worse her entire life. She waited until their footsteps faded before looking back toward the cage. I'm sorry. The apology surprised even her. I shouldn't have brought attention here. The wolf continued watching her. Its breathing had become slower, almost calmer. Across the yard, hidden behind another wagon, a small boy peeked around the corner. His clothes hung loosely over his tiny frame. One eye was bruised. A rope circled his wrists. He couldn't have been older than 8. His name was Finn. Captured months earlier after raiders destroyed his village. He watched the strange girl every evening. He couldn't understand her. Nobody shared food here. Not without expecting something in return. Yet every night, she gave away the little she had. Not to a person. To a beast everyone feared. Finn whispered quietly to himself. Why? No answer came. Rain grew heavier. Drops rolled down the wolf's scarred muzzle. Elena slowly reached through the bars. Not toward its face. Toward the silver collar cutting into its neck. She didn't touch it. She simply looked. The wounds were worse tonight. Fresh blood mixed with rainwater. They're hurting you. Her voice cracked. The wolf blinked once. Something shifted behind its tired eyes. Not anger. Recognition. As though somewhere deep inside broken memories. It knew that voice. Elena slowly picked up the strip of dried meat. If you won't eat, she smiled gently. I'll have to hold it until you decide. Minutes passed. Neither moved. The storm continued around them. The world felt strangely distant. Finally, the enormous wolf dragged itself forward. Every movement looked painful. Its chains scraped loudly across the wooden floor. Stopped inches away. Elena held perfectly still. She wasn't fearless. Her heart hammered against her chest. Her hands trembled. But she refused to pull away. Slowly, very slowly, the wolf lowered its head. Its nose brushed against her fingers. Warm breath touched her skin. Instead of biting, it gently took the meat from her hand. Elena smiled. A real smile. There you are. The wolf quietly chewed. For the first time since anyone could remember, the beast accepted food from another living soul. Hidden behind the wagon, Finn stared with wide eyes. He had just witnessed something impossible. When the food was gone, Elena stood slowly. I'll come back tomorrow. She adjusted her cloak. You won't be alone. She turned to leave. Behind her, the wolf suddenly lifted its head. Its golden eyes looked past the prison yard, past the rain, past the city walls, toward the distant royal castle standing proudly beneath flashes of lightning. A low sound escaped its throat. Not a growl, not a howl. It sounded almost like longing. Far away inside the palace, the Alpha King suddenly woke from another nightmare, pressing a hand against his chest as though something lost had whispered across the darkness. Neither of them knew it yet. But the quiet meeting between an Omega girl and a starving black wolf had just begun to change the fate of an entire kingdom. Morning arrived over the capital, but sunlight never truly reached the royal palace. Its towering walls reflected gold beneath the rising sun, yet inside those ancient halls, silence carried far more weight than glory. Servants moved carefully through marble corridors. Guards stood perfectly still beside carved pillars, and every noble who entered lowered their voice without being asked. The palace had not felt alive for years. Not since its king had lost something no one could explain. Far above the city, in a chamber overlooking the kingdom, Alpha King Kaelen stood alone before an enormous window. His broad shoulders remained perfectly straight. His expression calm, almost carved from stone. The dark ceremonial cloak resting over his armor moved gently with the morning breeze. To everyone who looked at him, he appeared unshakable. But appearances often hid the deepest wounds. Kaelen slowly closed his eyes. Fragments of another nightmare still lingered. Chains scraping across frozen stone. Golden eyes disappearing into darkness. A young woman's gentle voice whispering, "You're safe now." Nothing. The dream always ended before he reached the voice. Every single night. For 5 long years. He pressed one hand against the center of his chest. The familiar emptiness remained. It wasn't physical pain. It was worse. It felt as though half of his soul had wandered somewhere beyond his reach, leaving behind only silence. A knock echoed against the heavy wooden doors. "Your Majesty," a guard announced respectfully. "The council is assembled." Kaelen opened his eyes. The sadness vanished behind the mask every Alpha King learned to wear. "Let them wait 1 more minute." "Yes, Your Majesty." The guard bowed before disappearing. Kaelen remained alone. Just 1 more minute. 1 minute where he could admit to himself what no one else would ever hear. "I'm tired." The words barely left his lips. No one answered. Only the wind. The royal council chamber buzzed with restrained tension. Massive stone pillars lined both sides of the room while banners representing every allied pack hung from the ceiling. Around the circular table sat the most powerful alphas and nobles in the kingdom. Some respected Kaelen. Others feared him. A few quietly hoped to replace him. As the great doors opened, every conversation stopped. Kaelen entered without hurry. Without ceremony. Without looking at anyone. He simply walked toward the throne at the end of the chamber. The room instinctively rose. Even those who disliked him could not deny the authority filling every step. He sat. "You may begin." Lord Cedric, commander of the western borders, spoke first. "Our scouts report increased movement beyond the eastern mountains." Another noble nodded. "The Red Moon Pack gathers warriors. They believe we're vulnerable." Lord Darius leaned forward. "They remember the sacred wolf is gone." Silence settled. No one liked speaking those words. Not in front of the king. Kaelen's face never changed. "And," Darius hesitated, "we recommend a preemptive strike." Several council members immediately agreed. "If we attack first, we control the borders. We remind everyone who rules this kingdom." 1 by 1 voices filled the chamber. Expansion. Strength. Fear. Every suggestion sounded the same. Kaelen listened without interruption. When the final voice faded, he quietly asked one question. "How many children live in those border villages?" The room fell silent. Nobody answered immediately. Finally Cedric cleared his throat. "Approximately 4,000. "And how many would survive your war?" Silence. Kaelen slowly stood. "A king who begins unnecessary wars buries his own future." Lord Darius frowned. "Mercy invites rebellion." "No." Kaelen's deep voice echoed calmly through the chamber. "Pride invites graves." No one challenged him. Not openly. Only one man watched the king differently. Lord Varric. Well-dressed. Always smiling just enough to appear trustworthy. Yet behind those pleasant eyes lived endless calculation. He had spent years learning one important truth. A wounded king was easier to manipulate than a whole one. "My king," Varric said smoothly. "No one questions your wisdom." He paused carefully. "But the neighboring territories already believe you've become hesitant." Kaelen looked directly at him. "Hesitant? The people remember who you once were." Varric smiled politely. "The Alpha who hunted beside the sacred black wolf. The Alpha who never feared battle." Another calculated pause. "Some now wonder if that strength disappeared with your beast." Several nobles shifted uncomfortably. The words bordered on insult. Kaelen simply continued looking at him. Long enough that Varric finally lowered his eyes. "Are you finished?" "Yes, Your Majesty." "Good." The meeting continued. Yet inside his mind, Varric smiled. Because every mention of the missing wolf reopened wounds no healer could close. Exactly as planned. Hours later, Kaelen dismissed the council. The throne room emptied. Only his oldest advisor remained. Elder Rowan had served 3 generations of Alpha Kings. His white hair matched the wisdom carried inside tired eyes. "You didn't sleep again." Kaelen didn't answer. "You still dream of him." Another silence. "Finley." "I hear chains." Rowan nodded sadly. "And the voice?" Kaelen turned toward the window. "I've never seen her face. But every night. She tells me I'm safe." He shook his head. "It makes no sense." Rowan stepped beside him. "Not every bond is understood immediately. My wolf is gone." Rowan looked toward the distant mountains. "Perhaps. But I no longer believe he's dead." Kaelen frowned. "What changed your mind?" The old advisor smiled gently. "Hope." Kaelen almost laughed. "Hope isn't evidence." "No," Rowan agreed quietly. "But neither is despair." Far from the palace, the abandoned prison yard slowly came alive beneath another gray afternoon. Slave traders shouted as they loaded heavy wagons. Iron chains clattered across muddy ground. Children climbed silently into transport cages. No one resisted anymore. They had learned resistance earned only pain. Finn sat quietly beside one wagon, holding his bruised ribs. His thoughts weren't on escape. They stayed with the strange Omega. Would she come back tonight? Did she know the traders planned to leave before sunrise? Would the Black Wolf simply disappear? Nearby, 2 guards laughed while tightening fresh silver restraints around the prison wagon. "This monster isn't worth transporting. Lord Varek insists." "Personally," the second guard shrugged. "If a noble pays enough, I'll transport rocks." Neither noticed the wolf listening. Golden eyes remained half-closed. Yet beneath exhaustion, something stirred. Memory. Not complete. Just a feeling. A woman's gentle smile. Warm hands offering food. A voice refusing to fear him. Somewhere far away, someone was coming. That same evening, Elena finished another exhausting day cleaning the marketplace. Her payment consisted of a single loaf of coarse bread. She looked down at it, then smiled softly. "I suppose," she whispered to herself, "we'll share again tonight." She broke the loaf in half. One piece for herself. One piece carefully wrapped inside cloth. As she began walking toward the prison yard once more, she had no idea that inside the royal palace, the Alpha King suddenly froze in the middle of another conversation. His heartbeat stumbled. Just once. As though something invisible had briefly reached across the kingdom, calling him toward a fate he could no longer avoid. The sun disappeared behind dark clouds long before evening arrived. A cold wind drifted through the narrow streets of the capital, carrying the smell of rain, damp earth, and smoke from countless chimneys. Merchants hurried to close their stalls before another storm rolled across the kingdom. People wrapped themselves tightly in heavy cloaks and hurried home. Only one person walked in the opposite direction. Elena. She held a small cloth bundle close to her chest beneath her worn gray cloak. Today's meal had been even smaller than yesterday. Half a loaf of bread. A tiny piece of dried venison given to her by an old baker whose wife she had once helped nurse through a fever. And a handful of healing herbs she had gathered outside the city walls before sunrise. Most people would have kept every bite for themselves. Elena never could. As she crossed the northern bridge, she noticed soldiers loading the prison wagons. The slave convoy would leave within 2 days. The thought made her stomach tighten. If the wagons left, so would the Black Wolf. Somehow, that idea hurt more than she wanted to admit. She whispered to herself, "Just one more night," then continued walking. The abandoned prison yard felt quieter than usual. No drunken laughter. No shouting guards. Only the soft clatter of chains swaying in the evening wind. The old oak tree bent gently beneath gathering clouds. The prison wagon remained where it always had, waiting, just as he was. The black wolf lifted his head before Elena even reached the cage. For the first time, he had been listening for her footsteps. Golden eyes slowly met hers. There was still caution inside them, still pain. But something else had begun replacing fear. Recognition. Elena smiled warmly. I knew you'd be awake. She knelt beside the cage as she always did. I brought something better tonight. She carefully unwrapped the cloth. The scent of dried venison filled the cool air. The wolf's ears twitched immediately. Faint movement. Nothing dramatic. But Elena noticed. I thought you might like this. The wolf didn't move toward the food immediately. Does it? He watched her face, as though making certain she was truly there. Only after several quiet moments did he slowly crawl closer. The heavy silver chains scraped across the wooden floor. Each sound made Elena wince. Every movement looked painful. The enchanted restraints had rubbed raw circles around his neck and front legs. Some wounds had begun healing. Others had grown worse. She gently reached into her satchel. I found something. The wolf paused. I know it'll sting. She held up the small bundle of herbs. My mother used these whenever animals were hurt. The wolf remained perfectly still. Elena looked into his eyes. I'm not going to hurt you. She spoke as though talking to an old friend. Lily. She reached one trembling hand through the bars. The wolf could have bitten her. Could have snapped the delicate bones in her wrist before anyone had time to scream. Does it? He lowered his head, allowing her fingers to brush the burned skin beneath the silver collar. Elena took a slow breath. The wounds were deeper than she feared. Someone had tightened the restraints recently. They've been cruel again. Her voice barely rose above a whisper. I'm sorry. She crushed the herbs gently between her fingers before pressing them against one open wound. The wolf flinched. A low growl escaped his throat. Elena immediately stopped. I'm sorry. I know it burns. Instead of pulling away, she waited. Several long seconds passed. The wolf relaxed. He leaned slightly closer, giving silent permission. Carefully, she continued cleaning each wound. Rain began falling around them. Gentle, almost peaceful, hidden nearby. Finn watched everything. He had slipped away while the guards changed shifts. His bruises still hurt from the previous week's beating, but curiosity pushed him forward. He couldn't understand what he was seeing. The beast that terrified grown warriors sat completely still while a young Omega cleaned its wounds. No chains rattled. No growls echoed. Only quiet breathing. Finn finally stepped from behind an old wagon. Elena looked over her shoulder. Oh, you came. The little boy hesitated. I wanted to see. He glanced nervously toward the wolf. Why doesn't he eat you? Elena smiled softly. Maybe because no one ever asked whether he was hungry before deciding he was dangerous. Finn frowned. I don't understand. She looked toward the wolf. When people suffer for too long, they stop believing anyone will help. The boy lowered his eyes. I know that feeling. Elena's heart tightened. She reached into her cloth bundle, breaking the remaining bread into 3 pieces. One for herself, one for Finn, one for the wolf. Finn stared in surprise. You're sharing. She nodded. Food tastes better when nobody eats alone. The little boy accepted the bread with shaking hands. No one had shared a meal with him since his parents died. For several minutes, the 3 of them remained together beneath the rain. An Omega, an orphan, and a creature the kingdom believed was a monster, felt strangely peaceful. The wolf slowly finished eating. Instead of retreating deeper into the cage, he remained close, watching Elena. She laughed quietly. What? You keep staring. The wolf blinked. She tilted her head playfully. I'm beginning to think you understand every word I say. His ears moved slightly. almost as though he did. Finn giggled. I think he likes you. Elena smiled. I think. He paused. He's lonely. The word hung between them. Lonely. Not dangerous. Not cursed. Lonely. Something deep inside the wolf shifted. A memory flashed through his fractured mind. A warm palace courtyard. A younger Alpha laughing. Running beside him beneath the sun. Fire. Blood. Silver chains. Darkness. The vision disappeared before he could hold on to it. He closed his eyes tightly. A quiet whine escaped him. Elena noticed immediately. You remembered something. She didn't know how. She simply felt it. Very gently. She reached through the bars again. This time, instead of treating wounds, she rested her hand against the side of his face. The enormous wolf froze. No one had touched him with kindness in years. Slowly, almost uncertainly, he lowered his head until it rested against her hand. His eyes closed. Finn stared in amazement. The terrifying black wolf looked peaceful. The rain grew heavier. Without thinking, Elena began humming. Soft lullaby. The same melody her mother had sung when storms frightened her as a child. No words. Only a gentle tune carried by the wind. The wolf didn't move. His breathing became slower. Hummer. The tension inside his massive body slowly disappeared. It was the first real rest he had known in years. As Elena continued humming, something warm spread across her left wrist. She glanced down. For the briefest moment, a faint silver mark shimmered beneath her skin. It resembled half of an ancient moon. Before she could look closer, it vanished. She blinked. Strange. She rubbed her wrist. The warmth disappeared. Neither she nor Finn noticed the wolf quietly open one golden eye. He had seen it. Some forgotten instinct stirred deep within him. Not understanding. Only recognition. Far away, inside the royal palace, King Kaelen suddenly stopped reading a military report. A strange calm settled over him. For the first time in years, the crushing pressure inside his chest eased. Only slightly, but enough for him to notice. Elder Rowan looked up from across the room. You felt it too. Kaelen nodded slowly. My wolf. He whispered almost to himself. He's alive. The old advisor said nothing. 'Cause for the first time, he believed it as well. Back in the prison yard, Elena slowly stood. Dark clouds had covered the moon. I should go. She smiled at the wolf. I'll come again tomorrow. Finn looked worried. The guards say the wagons leave soon. Elena's smile faded. I know. She looked back at the black wolf. Something inside her refused to believe this was goodbye. The wolf remained at the front of the cage, watching until she disappeared beyond the broken gate. He did not return to the darkness. He simply waited, listening to the fading sound of her footsteps. For the first time since silver chains stole his freedom, he no longer felt completely alone. But neither Elena nor the wolf realized that somewhere in the shadows beyond the prison yard, a pair of cold eyes had witnessed everything. Lord Varex's spy quietly mounted his horse and rode toward the royal palace with dangerous news. Kaelen had earned the trust of the kingdom's most feared beast. The peaceful rhythm of the past few evenings did not last. Before sunset, dark clouds gathered over the prison yard, and with them came impatience. The slave traders wanted everything ready before dawn. The convoy would leave with the first light, carrying prisoners, stolen goods, and the chained black wolf far beyond the capital. Elena felt unease long before she reached the old wagon. Something was wrong. The yard was louder than usual. Angry voices echoed through the muddy ground, followed by the sharp crack of a whip. She immediately quickened her pace. As she rounded the corner, her heart dropped. Finn lay curled on the ground, trying to shield his head with his small arms while one of the slave traders raised a leather whip again. You filthy little thief, the trader shouted. Stealing bread from paying customers. I wasn't stealing, Finn cried. The little girl hasn't eaten in 2 days. The whip came down again. Before it could strike, Elena stepped between them. The leather cracked across her shoulder instead. Pain shot through her body, but she refused to move. The yard fell silent. The trader stared at her with disbelief. "You stupid Omega," he sneered. "Move." Elena slowly helped Finn behind her. "He only took food for a hungry child. And that's worth a beating." The man laughed cruelly. "No. It's worth teaching every prisoner what happens when they forget their place." He lifted the whip again. This time Elena didn't step back. She looked directly into his eyes. If feeding starving children is a crime, then perhaps this kingdom has forgotten what justice means. The words angered the trader more than any insult. "Seize her." 2 guards rushed forward. Elena knew she couldn't fight them. She wasn't a warrior. She had no weapon. But she had noticed something when she entered the yard. An abandoned supply cart stood only a few steps away, loaded with dry straw, wooden crates, and oil barrels waiting for transport. Beside it hung an unattended lantern. An idea flashed through her mind. It was dangerous, perhaps foolish, but it was the only chance. As the guards reached for her, Elena grabbed the lantern and threw it into the supply cart. For one silent heartbeat, nothing happened. Then flames exploded through the dry straw. Fire raced across the wagon, climbing into the stacked crates before bursting toward the sky. Panic spread instantly. "Fire! Save the supplies! The horses!" Guards abandoned their posts. Slave traders rushed in every direction, shouting over one another as frightened horses pulled against their ropes. Smoke filled the prison yard. The confusion became complete. "Run!" Elena shouted to the prisoners. "Take the children!" Chains rattled as frightened captives stumbled toward the broken gate. Some hesitated, others didn't. Hope had returned too suddenly to question. Finn grabbed the hands of 2 younger children and pulled them toward the opening in the fence. Inside the prison wagon, the black wolf heard Elena's voice. His golden eyes snapped open. Smoke drifted through the iron bars. He saw guards chasing children. He saw Elena surrounded. Something ancient awakened deep inside him. With a deafening roar, he lunged against the enchanted silver chains. The restraints cut deeply into his flesh. Magic sparked across the iron links. Once, crack. One of the enchanted chains shattered. The remaining restraints still clung to one front leg, but they could no longer hold his full strength. The prison wagon exploded apart as the enormous wolf burst through the wooden walls. Guards froze in terror. "The beast! It's loose!" Several archers immediately raised their bows. But the wolf ignored every soldier, ignored every fleeing guard, ignored every opportunity for revenge. His eyes searched for only one person, Elena. He found her just as another guard reached for Finn. Without hesitation, the wolf threw himself between the child and the spear. The weapon struck his shoulder instead. He didn't even flinch. Standing over Finn, the massive black wolf lowered his head and released a thunderous growl that echoed across the burning prison yard. Every guard stepped back, not because he attacked, but because they finally understood. The creature they had called a monster was protecting a child. Finn stared up at the enormous wolf with trembling eyes. You saved me." The wolf never looked away from the approaching soldiers. He stood like a living wall, strong, silent, unmovable. Across the smoke-filled yard, Elena watched with tears gathering in her eyes. She had been right all along. The kingdom had feared the wrong monsters. But before she could reach them, rough hands seized her from behind. A heavy blow struck the back of her head. The world spun. Her vision blurred. As darkness closed around her, she saw the black wolf turn toward her. His golden eyes filled not with rage, but with desperate fear. He tried to run to her. The broken silver chain wrapped around his leg caught beneath the shattered wagon. For one heartbreaking moment, neither could reach the other. Then everything faded into darkness, leaving only the glow of burning flames beneath the moonlit sky. Darkness did not feel empty, felt warm. Somewhere far away, Elena could hear the crackling of fire fading into silence. Then came another sound. Slow, steady footsteps echoing across polished stone instead of muddy ground. The smell of smoke slowly disappeared. It was replaced by lavender, fresh herbs, and clean linen. She blinked. Soft morning light filtered through a nearby window, painting golden patterns across a white ceiling she had never seen before. For several moments she simply stared upward, confused. Then pain spread across the back of her head. She winced quietly. "You shouldn't sit up yet." The gentle voice came from beside the bed. An elderly healer smiled kindly while replacing a damp cloth on Elena's forehead. "You inhaled too much smoke." Elena immediately looked around. The room was unlike anything she had ever known. Stone walls decorated with carved vines. Shelves filled with medicine bottles. Fresh flowers resting beside open windows. This wasn't a prison. It wasn't a slave camp. It was peaceful. "Where am I?" she asked softly. "The royal infirmary." Elena's heart skipped. "The palace." The healer nodded. "Royal guards found you unconscious after last night's fire. They assumed you were one of the prisoners." Elena quickly tried to stand. "I have to go. The children. The wolf." The healer gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "The children escaped." Relief washed across Elena's face. "And the wolf?" The old woman hesitated. "No one knows." Those 3 words left a heaviness inside the room. Elena lowered her eyes. She silently prayed he had survived. Later that afternoon, after the healers insisted she rest, Elena quietly slipped from her room. She wasn't trying to escape. She simply needed fresh air. The palace corridors stretched endlessly before her. Tall windows overlooked beautiful gardens. Ancient paintings lined the walls. Servants walked gracefully through polished hallways, bowing respectfully whenever nobles passed. Elena felt completely out of place. Her worn dress, patched cloak, and simple boots looked painfully ordinary among such beauty. She lowered her head and continued walking. Without realizing it, she wandered into the palace library. The moment she stepped inside, everything became still. Thousands of books filled towering shelves reaching toward an arched ceiling painted with stars and moons. Sunlight streamed through stained glass windows, filling the room with warm colors. Dust floated gently through quiet air. It was the calmest place Elena had ever seen. She smiled without thinking. "I never knew so many books existed." A voice answered from behind another shelf. "Most people never come here." Elena turned. A tall man stood holding several old books against one arm. His clothing was simple compared to the nobles outside. Dark trousers, plain black coat, no royal jewelry, no crown, only calm gray eyes that quietly studied her. He offered a polite smile. "I don't believe we've met." Elena lowered her head respectfully. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to disturb anyone." "You aren't." His voice remained gentle. "I'm Kael." She blinked. "Kael. A palace scholar." The lie came naturally. No one questioned a scholar wandering through the library. Elena smiled faintly. "I'm Elena." Neither of them noticed the strange warmth that briefly settled between them. It lasted only a heartbeat, then disappeared. Kaelen studied the young woman carefully. She looked exhausted. Smoke stains still marked the sleeves of her dress. A fresh bandage wrapped around one shoulder. Yet instead of asking about herself, her first question surprised him. "Have you heard anything about the escaped prisoners?" Kaelen nodded. "Most reached the forest safely." She smiled with visible relief. "And the children? They're being searched for. I hope they aren't found." Kaelen looked at her curiously. "You would rather they remain fugitives. I would rather they remain alive." Her answer came without hesitation. Silence settled comfortably between them. After a moment she wandered toward a nearby shelf filled with old history books. One worn volume caught her attention. The Ancient Bonds of Wolves and Kings. She carefully opened it. Its pages described forgotten legends about wolves who once chose their companions not through power, but through trust. Kaelen watched quietly. You enjoy history. Elena nodded. I enjoy stories that remind people monsters aren't always born. She turned another page. Sometimes. They're simply abandoned long enough. Those words struck Kaelen harder than he expected. He couldn't explain why. They felt strangely familiar. As though they answered a question he had carried for years. The afternoon passed quietly. No grand speeches. No dramatic confessions. Only peaceful conversation. They discussed herbs. Old legends. Healing. For the first time in many years, Kaelen found himself smiling without forcing it. Meanwhile, Elena noticed something unusual. The pounding headache she had carried since childhood had completely disappeared. She touched her temple in surprise. That's strange. Kaelen looked up. What is? My head. It doesn't hurt anymore. He smiled faintly. Perhaps the palace healers are better than they admit. She laughed softly. Perhaps. Neither realized another mystery had quietly unfolded. For the first time in 5 years, Kaelen's nightmares had not returned during the afternoon. The constant pressure inside his chest had become lighter. Not gone, but lighter. Enough to make him wonder why. Outside the library doors, hidden within the shadows of the corridor, another pair of eyes watched them. Lord Varric. His pleasant smile disappeared the moment he recognized Elena. So, he whispered coldly. The little Omega survived. One of his spies stepped closer. My lord. That's the girl who kept feeding the black wolf. Varric's expression hardened. And now she's speaking with the king. The spy frowned. Should we remove her? Varric shook his head slowly. Not yet. He looked toward the library entrance. Sometimes the most dangerous people destroy themselves. If you simply give them enough rope. With that, he quietly disappeared down the corridor. Inside the peaceful library, Elena closed the ancient book and smiled at Kael, never realizing she had just spent an entire afternoon speaking to the Alpha King himself. And somewhere beyond the palace walls, a pair of golden eyes watched the castle from the edge of the forest. The black wolf had survived. And he had only one purpose left. To find the girl who had never stopped believing he deserved to live. The next morning the palace felt different. The peaceful silence Elena had found inside the library had disappeared. Servants hurried through the corridors with worried expressions, guards stood at every doorway, and whispers traveled faster than footsteps. Something important was happening. A young palace attendant approached her room and bowed politely. Lady Elena, the royal council requests your presence. Elena frowned. My presence? Yes. You are to give your account of the fire at the prison yard. A nervous feeling settled inside her chest. She had never stood before nobles. She had never spoken inside a royal court. But she knew one thing. If she remained silent, no one would speak for the children who had suffered there. The council chamber was larger than she remembered seeing from outside. Massive stone pillars stretched toward the ceiling, and sunlight poured through towering stained glass windows. At the center stood a long circular table where the kingdom's most powerful alphas and nobles sat in silence. Elena slowly walked into the chamber. Dozens of eyes immediately turned toward her. Some were curious, some looked disgusted. Others simply saw an Omega who did not belong. Near the far end of the chamber stood Kael. Or so she still believed. He wore a dark cloak and remained quietly among the royal advisors. When their eyes briefly met, he offered a small, reassuring nod. It calmed her racing heart. Lord Varric rose from his chair. So, this is the woman responsible for burning royal property. His voice echoed confidently through the chamber. Several nobles nodded in agreement. Another Alpha added, "She claims slave traders abused prisoners. Yet we have received no official complaints." Elena looked around the room. "No official complaints." She spoke softly. "How could starving children write reports?" Silence answered her. She continued, "I saw boys beaten for sharing bread. I saw omegas sold like livestock. I saw a black wolf chained until it could barely stand. The guards laughed while it starved." Her voice never rose. She simply spoke the truth. One noble scoffed. "You expect this council to believe the word of an Omega over loyal officials?" Elena lifted her head. "I expect this council to care whether innocent people suffered." Several council members shifted uncomfortably. Her calm honesty carried more weight than anger ever could. Lord Varek stepped forward again. "Convenient. You set the fire. You helped prisoners escape. And now you invent stories about corruption." He motioned toward two guards. "Bring in the witnesses." Two frightened prison guards entered the chamber. Clearly coached. One quickly pointed toward Elena. She worked with enemy spies. The wolf obeyed her commands. The fire was planned. Murmurs spread across the room. Elena remained perfectly still. She knew they were lying, but proving it seemed impossible. Varric smiled. "My king, I believe the evidence speaks for itself." That moment, a calm voice interrupted him. "No." Every head turned. The quiet scholar stepped forward. He slowly removed the dark cloak from his shoulders. He removed the simple silver clasp hiding the royal crest beneath his collar. Gasps echoed through the chamber. Elena's eyes widened. Her breath caught. The man she had laughed with inside the library, the man who listened more than he spoke, was walking toward the throne. He turned to face the council. His voice remained calm. "I am the Alpha King." The entire chamber immediately stood and bowed. Everyone except Elena. She simply stared in complete disbelief. Kaelen gently looked at her. "I apologize for hiding my identity. It was necessary." Elena struggled to find words. You were the king." He gave a quiet nod. Before either could speak again, the great doors of the council chamber burst open. A palace guard rushed inside, breathless. "Your Majesty! The Black Wolf!" The room froze. The guard swallowed hard. "Has entered the capital." Fear spread instantly across every noble's face. Another guard shouted from the hallway. "It isn't attacking anyone. It's walking straight toward the palace." The council chamber fell into complete silence. And somewhere beyond those towering palace doors, heavy footsteps echoed across the stone streets, growing closer with every passing second. A strange silence settled over the capital. It was the kind of silence that came before a storm, when even the wind seemed afraid to move. Outside the palace gates, merchants abandoned their stalls. Mothers hurried their children indoors. Royal guards formed defensive lines across the main courtyard, their silver-tipped spears trembling despite years of training. No one gave the order to retreat, yet no one dared step forward either. From the end of the stone road, a massive black wolf appeared. His dark fur was still scarred by silver chains, and fresh blood stained one shoulder where the spear had struck him during the prison escape. His body remained lean from weeks of starvation, but there was quiet strength in every step he took. He wasn't running. He wasn't hunting. He simply walked toward the palace. Each heavy paw echoed across the stone streets. Inside the council chamber, fear spread faster than wildfire. "The beast is here. Seal the doors. Protect His Majesty." Several nobles stumbled backward while guards surrounded the throne with raised weapons. Only Kaelen remained still. Something inside him had begun to awaken. Every step the wolf took sent a strange warmth through his chest. Felt familiar, painful, hopeful. The enormous palace doors slowly opened. The black wolf entered. Hundreds of eyes locked onto him. No one breathed. The guards expected him to leap toward the throne. The nobles expected blood. The wolf calmly walked past every soldier. He ignored the raised spears. Ignored the frightened nobles. Ignored the Alpha King himself. His golden eyes searched only for one person. Elena. She stood frozen near the center of the chamber, her heart racing as the wolf approached. Someone shouted from behind her. "Move away!" Another guard cried. "He'll kill you!" But Elena didn't move. She looked into those familiar golden eyes and saw the same lonely soul she had visited every night beneath the old oak tree. Softly, almost like a whisper carried by the wind, she spoke the words she had repeated beside the prison wagon. "You don't have to be afraid anymore." The wolf stopped only inches away. For one endless heartbeat, the entire kingdom waited. Then, with incredible gentleness, the great black wolf lowered his head beneath Elena's trembling hand. She slowly placed her fingers against his scarred fur. The chamber stood frozen in disbelief. The creature every story had called a monster closed his eyes like a wounded soul finally returning home. Tears filled Elena's eyes as she gently stroked the fur around the old silver burns. "I'm here," she whispered. "You aren't alone anymore." The wolf released a quiet breath. Not a growl. Not a roar. Sound of peace. At that exact moment, Kaelen staggered backward. A sharp pain shot through his chest before suddenly disappearing. Ancient silver symbols burst across the marble floor, glowing brighter with every heartbeat. The wolf lifted his head. His body became surrounded by soft black and silver light. Everyone watched in stunned silence as streams of glowing energy flowed from the wolf toward the Alpha King. Fragments of forgotten memories flooded Kaelen's mind. The assassination. The betrayal. Lord Varek's enchanted chains. The desperate sacrifice that had torn part of his soul away to protect the royal bloodline. The missing sacred wolf had never truly been separate. He had carried half of the Alpha King's spirit all along. As the final strand of light returned to Kaelen, the wolf remained standing beside Elena, no longer looking like a feared beast. He looked like a guardian. And every noble in the throne room realized they had spent years fearing the wrong creature. Their true enemy had been hiding among them all along. No one in the throne room spoke. The glowing symbols slowly faded from the marble floor, but the silence they left behind felt even heavier. Every noble stared at the Alpha King, then at the black wolf standing peacefully beside Elena. King Kaelen slowly lifted his head. His silver-gray eyes had changed. The emptiness that had haunted them for years was gone. In its place burned quiet certainty. Along with memories he had believed were lost forever. He remembered the night of the assassination. He remembered the ambush inside the royal forest. Most of all, he remembered Lord Varek. The noble had not tried to save his king. He had betrayed him. Using forbidden magic, Varek had torn part of Kaelen's sacred wolf spirit away, binding it inside a physical body with enchanted silver chains. As long as the wolf remained imprisoned, Kaelen would never regain his full strength or his complete memories. Varek slowly stepped backward. His confident smile had disappeared. My king. This is a misunderstanding." Kaelen's voice was calm. "No. It is finally the truth." He turned toward the royal guards. "Arrest Lord Varek." The chamber erupted into chaos. Varek pointed wildly toward Elena. "She's lying. She bewitched the sacred wolf. The Omega corrupted the bond." Before anyone could move, the black wolf stepped in front of Elena. A deep growl rolled through the throne room. Not wild. Not angry. Protective. The guards hesitated for only a moment before surrounding Varek instead. Realizing escape was slipping away, Varek suddenly drew a hidden silver dagger and lunged toward Elena. "If I fall, you die with me." A gasp echoed through the hall. But Kaelen moved faster. In the blink of an eye, he caught Varek's wrist. The dagger clattered harmlessly across the marble floor. Kaelen's voice became colder than winter itself. You spent years hiding behind innocent lives. That ends today. With one powerful motion, he forced Varric to his knees before the entire council. The guards immediately bound the traitor in enchanted iron. As he was dragged away, every noble understood that the kingdom's greatest enemy had never lived beyond its borders. He had sat among them, pretending to serve the crown. Later that afternoon, hidden beneath the royal archives, soldiers uncovered secret chambers filled with chained records, illegal slave contracts, and ledgers bearing Varric's seal. Every missing child, every captured Omega, every family sold into slavery. Their names had been carefully recorded like merchandise. Elena stood silently among the dusty shelves. Tears filled her eyes. So many. Kaelen looked at the endless ledgers. We cannot erase what happened. No, Elena answered softly. But we can make sure it never happens again. She picked up one heavy book and carried it outside. Without hesitation, she placed it onto a growing fire in the palace courtyard. One by one, the other ledgers followed. Flames consumed years of cruelty. Children watched as the records that had stolen their names turned into drifting ashes. Finn stood beside Elena, holding her hand tightly. Does this mean I'm free? Elena knelt beside him and smiled. It means no one owns you anymore. The little boy threw his arms around her, crying into her shoulder. Many soldiers quietly looked away, hiding tears of their own. As the final silver chain recovered from the prison wagon was brought forward, Kaelen took it in both hands. He looked toward Elena. You were the first person who saw a soul instead of a monster. Together they pulled. The ancient chain shattered into countless silver fragments that scattered across the stone courtyard. At that exact moment, a warm light surrounded them. A soft silver mark appeared on Elena's wrist. The same symbol slowly appeared on Kaelen's. The ancient mate bond had finally awakened. Neither of them rushed forward. Neither spoke grand promises. Kaelen simply stepped closer. Then, before his council, his warriors, and his people, the Alpha King lowered himself onto one knee before the humble Omega who had restored his wolf, his memories, and his heart. He gently took her hand. I spent years searching for the part of my soul that was stolen. His voice was quiet, yet everyone heard every word. I never imagined it would be found by the kindest heart in my kingdom. Elena's eyes filled with tears. She smiled through them. Not because fate had chosen her, but because kindness had changed everything. And for the first time in many years, the kingdom believed that healing was stronger than fear. Spring arrived slowly. The harsh winter that had covered the kingdom for months finally gave way to warm sunlight, blooming wildflowers, and fresh green fields stretching beyond the palace walls. It was as though nature itself had been waiting for the kingdom to heal before allowing new life to begin again. For the first time in many years, the people smiled without fear. The slave market that once echoed with chains and cries had disappeared completely. The old wooden platforms where innocent people had been sold were torn down stone by stone. In their place stood a quiet garden filled with white flowers and young oak trees. Every tree carried a small wooden plaque. Not with titles, not with ranks, only names. The names of those who had suffered. The names of those who had never returned. No one would be forgotten again. Just beyond the northern gate, where the abandoned prison yard had once stood, workers built something entirely different. The rusted cages were gone. The broken wagons had been dismantled. The silver chains had been melted into farming tools instead of weapons. What had once been a place of fear slowly became a sanctuary. Children laughed where prisoners had once cried. Wounded wolves rested peacefully beneath tall trees instead of behind iron bars. Healers moved from shelter to shelter, caring for abandoned animals and frightened children alike. Above the entrance hung a simple wooden sign, the House of Second Chances. It had been Elena's idea. She believed everyone deserved one place in the world where they were judged by kindness instead of their past. Finn ran happily through the courtyard carrying a basket filled with bread. His bruises had long disappeared. The fear that once haunted his young eyes had slowly been replaced by curiosity and joy. He stopped beside a small white wolf pup that had injured one of its paws. "Don't worry," Finn whispered, kneeling beside it. "I know someone who fixes everything." The little wolf licked his hand. A familiar laugh answered from nearby. Elena walked across the courtyard wearing the same simple clothes she had always worn. Even after becoming the Alpha King's mate, she had refused expensive gowns except during official ceremonies. She still preferred practical dresses stained with herbs and flour. She smiled at Finn. "That's a very serious patient." Finn grinned. "He says his paw hurts." Elena knelt beside the pup. "Then we'll make him feel better." She gently wrapped the tiny paw with fresh herbs and clean cloth. Watching her work, Finn asked quietly, "Do queens always bandage wolves?" Elena laughed softly. "I don't know. But I hope this one always does." Not far away, Kaelen watched the scene from beneath an old oak tree. He wore no crown today, only simple dark clothing. The people passing through the sanctuary greeted him naturally instead of with fear. Children even waved. He waved back. Elder Rowan slowly joined him. "You've changed." Kaelen smiled faintly. "I finally remembered the kind of king my father wanted me to become." Rowan looked toward Elena. "No. You remembered because someone reminded you." Kaelen followed his gaze. Elena was helping an elderly woman carry water while Finn chased the wolf pup through the grass. She hadn't changed. Power had never interested her. Status had never mattered. She simply continued helping whoever stood in front of her. Kaelen quietly said, "That's exactly why she was always stronger than I was." That evening the entire kingdom gathered inside the palace gardens beneath the first full moon of spring. Music drifted softly through the warm night air. Families shared food. Children laughed. Even wolves rested peacefully among the crowds. There was no fear, only peace. Kaelen stepped onto the small stone platform overlooking the gardens. The conversations slowly faded. Instead of delivering a long royal speech, he simply reached for Elena's hand. She looked at him with the same gentle smile she had worn the first night she offered bread to a starving wolf. He held her hand carefully. "There was a time," Kaelen began quietly, "when I believed strength meant standing alone." He paused. "I was wrong." He looked into Elena's eyes. The strongest heart in this kingdom belonged to someone who had almost nothing, yet still found enough kindness to feed a starving soul. The crowd listened in complete silence. Kaelen continued, "You didn't save a monster. You reminded a broken king how to be human." A tear slipped down Elena's cheek. She smiled through it. "And you reminded me," she whispered, "that even wounded hearts can find their way home." The silver mate marks upon their wrists glowed softly beneath the moonlight. No magical explosion followed. No dramatic display of power. Only two hands gently holding one another. It was enough. High above the palace walls, the great black wolf stood upon a quiet hill overlooking the kingdom. His golden eyes reflected the moon as a calm breeze stirred his dark fur. He was no longer starving, no longer chained, no longer feared. He watched the people below with quiet peace before lifting his head toward the stars. His deep, powerful howl echoed across the valley. This time it carried no loneliness, carried hope. And from that night forward, mothers told their children a different story. Not about a terrible black wolf that brought death, but about an Omega girl who shared her last piece of bread with a forgotten soul, and proved that the smallest act of kindness could heal a king, free a kingdom, and change destiny forever.